finally, a source of raw, real, and honest information on healthcare issues that matter most. Welcome to BS Free MD. From the latest medical information to how to stay sane as a doctor or a patient, no subject is taboo, no BS is allowed. Now, let's welcome your hosts, Doctors May and Tim Hindmarsh.
Okay, so today I think thrilled would be an understatement.
Do I need to hold you down in your seat?
Well, you know, we've had other people that I've been kind of fanboying over, but this covers several years and an absolute obsession that I've had with the Calgary Flames, good, bad, and ugly.
And if you don't know what he's talking about, because you might not follow hockey, it's a hockey team.
It's hockey. So today we have the absolute honor of interviewing Theo Fleury, who is the Stanley Cup champion as well as an Olympic gold medalist. And he has an unbelievable story. It isn't just about hockey and hockey stuff. It goes down some incredibly dark alleys and then some unbelievably redemptive, powerful story. I read his book, Playing with Fire, and it just absolutely blew my mind. So let's bring in Theo. Welcome to BS Free MD. We are thrilled to have you.
Yeah, it's an honor to be here.
Excellent. Just what happened?
Oh. Yeah. Okay. I'm back.
I love that. It's an honor to be here, and somehow
it's perfect.
Yes,
the port got plugged.
It's an honor to be here.
Thank you so much, Tim. I have to start this with the story I told May last night. So May 25th, 1989, I'm pretty sure you know exactly where you were.
Yes.
Yeah, that night. I know exactly where I was. I was at 14 Harrington Place in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, where I was still living with my parents. I was studying for my finals in my first year of medical school, and it was the 6th game of the Stanley Cup Finals. And you guys, the Calgary Flames, had a chance to put it away and win the cup in Montreal. So I was studying, and I was just like absolutely racked with anxiety. And I ran downstairs and I turned on the TV just in time for the first goal. I think it was McKinnon or something. The Flames scored the first goal, and I started Colin Patterson. I started freaking out, yelling. My friends are upstairs studying because my parents were off in Asia or something. We were all like taking over the house and having this big study session. They come running downstairs. I said, "Look, boys, here's the way it's going to be. I'm watching this game because I'm watching the Flames win the Stanley Cup. I don't care about any of these exams. I know I'm going to pass. I'm not going to get kicked out of medical school, and I'm not going to remember a single freaking grade I get on any of these tests, but I guarantee you I will remember when the Flames win the Stanley Cup." And that is exactly what happened. I remember Don Cherry interviewing you after the game. You were like, "I love everybody. I love Canada." And it was just absolutely
And what
fantastic.
class were you studying for?
I have absolutely no idea. So tell us a bit about, let's just start at the, kind of the beginning. You were at the peak of peaks in, the absolute greatest sport especially for a Canadian. And you were what, 21, 22 when the Flames won?
I was 20.
20. Wow.
20 years old. Yeah. Well, any kid that grows up in Canada, obviously at some point in their life is introduced to the game of hockey. And, I was introduced at a very young age, and I remember the very first time I put on skates, it was like, I didn't fall down. I didn't struggle. I was just kind of this born natural kid. And, how many 5-year-olds find their sort of destiny and purpose in life at 5 years old? And, that's what happened for me. And, I also have a background where I didn't really want to be at home anyways. Both my parents had experienced childhood trauma in their life, and that manifested itself into addictions as a coping mechanism. And so, I grew up in chaos and drama and violence and all kinds of crazy stuff. And, the rink was my happy place. And because it was my happy place, I spent as much time as I possibly could, you know, at the rink. And not only that, I learned about team. I learned about the importance of playing and being a part of a team, where, we learned about respect. You know, we, we live in a world, today where we have completely lost respect for one another, people's feelings, people's possessions, all these things. And, we learned respect early on in life, and then we learned about loving and caring about our teammates, that everybody plays a role and everybody has a job to do. And then finally we learned about consequences, that we're all responsible for our choices and our actions and our decisions. And those come sometimes with consequences when we step out of line. And so, from a very early age, I learned things that, I still hold near and dear to my heart today. And it's probably, the biggest reason why I've been able to make a comeback in life is, because of that early childhood experience, playing on a team.
Wow. Yeah. I was just thinking of what you said about the rink being, your outlet. I think of growing up, I grew up in a mining town, actually in northern Manitoba, Flin Flon, where the Bombers are. And I just watched a documentary that someone did on Flin Flon and the Bombers, and it was mostly on the hockey, but how important the team is and the discipline it teaches you. And I think for people that aren't hockey people that are listening, I don't think the same thing happens like on the football teams down here in the States. And it's almost like I would say military bonding experience, but you really learn the discipline, the team, what it means. That's the only way I can really explain it. I don't know if I'm like off base or what, but I know that even as being a girl, I didn't play hockey. I figure skated, but I just know the guys that I went to school with, the guys that came in for the junior team, the Bombers, it was very much a camaraderie. They had each other's backs. So I get it.
Yeah. Well, that's why we put our kids in sports, is to create quality human beings. We don't put our kids in sports to create professional athletes.
Amen.
And I think somewhere along the line that's gotten it's gotten crazy. Like minor hockey in Canada is like out of control. It's completely out of, because everybody thinks their kid's going to play in the NHL. Well,
right.
And this is what I tell them is there's only 800 jobs in the NHL. And guess what? Most of them are taken because Ovechkin has a 10-year deal, Crosby, Malkin, Taves, Kane, all these, so we have 9 million kids worldwide playing for 60 jobs a year, and that's it. There's no more jobs, right? So,
I know our son did the math. He was of course, brilliant. And we're down here. He's playing these boys and girls club football, and everybody wants to be a football player. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
And this is the push. And of course, parents are living vicariously through their kid, and it's just all screwed up. But our son, even in 7th grade, I think he did the math. He's like, okay, how many NFL draft spots are there? How many kids are playing? Yeah. And I'm small, and this is just BS. I'm like,
well, yeah. And then, he didn't grow till a little bit later in life. And he was like, Dad, I don't want to die.
Yeah.
And so he decided, I think what I want to be an engineer and have a military career and potentially be a, Air Force pilot. And it's just there you go. That's a pretty cool career.
Yeah. And so, and there's so many things that you can learn, right? And, I know even, post hockey career that, everything I learned in the sport of hockey, it's so transferable to any aspect of your life, and working for different people and different companies and working for myself, it's all about team. And if you don't have a good team around you, you're not going to be successful. It's as simple as that. and you have to treat people with respect. You have to love and care for them, you know, and you know, inspire them and teach them things that they need to learn, and I need to learn, right? You know, I'm 55 years old, and I'm far from, you know, the point where, you know, I can't learn anymore. You know, you know, that's why we're here. That's why we're here on the earth, is to, you know, is to learn from other people. And I always go into every situation, you know, especially in the work that I do now, which is, you know, helping trauma survivors who have mental illness and addiction issues, is I want to learn more from them than I can teach them. You know what I mean? And that takes the ego out of it. That takes, you know, me, uh, um, you know, thinking that I know everything, because, you know, it's just not going to work. And you're not going to be able to get that person to where they want to go if your ego's in the way.
I love it. I'm glad, you know, we touched on that, because I know that for our friends, circle of friends, even what I see happening with kids sports, and the attitude, you know, is just all mixed up, upside down. And the importance is it's there to help build your child up. You're right, not to turn them into professional athlete. If they do, that's a bonus, a dream if they want it. But it's about learning lifelong skills, teamwork, growing as an individual into a great human being. And the parents need to just step back and remember it's not all about them. So,
I
yeah.
mean, it's really amazing. So this may be an appropriate segue where you talk about trauma and your work now with working with trauma. So,
Where
so
did you? Oh, sorry, Tim. Where did you grow up? I'm just curious.
I grew up in Russell, Manitoba. So
Oh, okay.
about what,
Yeah.
12 hours from Flin Flon,
Yeah.
straight
It's
north.
basically on the Greyhound bus on the gravel road back in the
Yeah.
in the back of the day.
Yeah.
Okay.
so it's so this whole hockey experience as a child and as a young man becomes your formative experience, becomes essentially like the real family. You
Mhm.
have brothers, you have coaches, you're learning to, you know, to really be a man, and then the trauma happens.
Mhm.
So
Walk us through
walk
that.
us through
What
that
was
one.
that in Russell, or was that when you went and were playing junior hockey, for people that don't
Well,
sort of follow hockey?
you know, I already had trauma, right?
Uh-huh.
Because of my
Uh-huh.
parents,
Uh-huh.
right? Going through that experience, I already had trauma. And then, you know, because my parents just weren't available, right? They had their own stuff. And I had a dream of, you know, wanting to make hockey, you know, my career. I ran into this coach who basically, you know, promised me a one-way ticket to the NHL. I left home at 15. I moved to Winnipeg with this particular scout and coach. And over the next 2.5 years, I would be raped by him 150 times over a 2.5 year period. So, you know, as a 15-year-old boy, you have no idea what the hell's happening, what's going on. You know, quickly discovered alcohol as a coping mechanism to suppress the emotional pain and suffering from that experience. Became, you know, pretty much an instant alcoholic. But, you know, went on to have this amazing hockey career, you know, very successful. And, you know, what was like 19 years ago, I had a fully loaded pistol in my mouth, ready to pull the trigger and end my life. Not because I wanted to die, but because I was completely exhausted from living in emotional pain and suffering for the majority of my life. Tried everything on the planet to get rid of it. Wasn't able to pull the trigger, which told me that I actually wanted to live, but I had no idea how to live life on life's terms. And then got sober September 18th, 2005. Been sober ever since and been on this incredible, amazing journey of healing and self-discovery and helping people and, you know, you name it. So it's been it's been an interesting ride, but there isn't one thing I would have changed. I believe that God has always had a plan for me. The only time the plan's gone sideways is when I've been in the driver's seat. And so, um, you know, I surrendered, turned my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand Him. And, I don't even know how many days. It's been almost 6,300 consecutive days of sobriety. And I have truly, an amazing, incredible life.
So it in your book, which I'm going to bring a picture of in, hopefully, Playing with Fire. In your book, there you talk about how I mean, I was just stunned. Like I was explaining this to May. I said, you would go pretty much straight from the bar to practice,
Mm-hmm.
like over and over and over again. And then not just make the team or play well, but score 50 goals in a year
Mm-hmm.
and get, chosen to.
Now, I have to stop you because people are thinking, go to the bar. He only won when he was 20. So in Canada, the drinking age in Manitoba
but
was 18, so you could legally go to the bar, not
Right,
like
but
America.
Yeah.
Or you can still sneak in. I get it.
Professional athletes don't have a problem with fake IDs, so that's not a problem.
Anyway,
so you would be drunk and go straight to hockey practice, maybe dry out a little bit during the day, and then go like score a hat trick that night. And I was just like, and then, but I get it once, but that was like years of that kind of behavior, and you're just like, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. I think the most incredible part, I literally had tears in my eyes when I read it, and I wish I could read it now, but of course it's packed because we're moving. When you talk about the day that you got sober and how that night you essentially were in the bathroom praying and crying out to God and were utterly crushed, and you woke up the next morning and you looked at your wife and you said, it's over. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Mm-hmm. Well, I was in a new relationship, and for the first 6 months of that relationship, we partied and did a lot of drugs and just crazy stuff. And I could see that this relationship was going down the same path and the same road, and I knew that if I kept going, that that I was gonna die, but not a quick death. It was going to be a lonely, painful, angry, miserable death, right? And I knew that I was better than what I was showing the world at that point. And came home, was drunk, had an argument with Jen, and that left me in the washroom, right? And and yeah, I'd punched a few holes in the wall, and I was, obviously, in a very bad state. And that's when I reached out to God, and I had it out with God. I went up one side of God, went down the other side, called him every name in the book, made up a couple of my own. And then finally I said, I go, God, you only give me as much as I can handle. I said, I'm full. I said, you can't put one more thing on my plate. And then at the end of the conversation, I said, please, please, God, take away the obsession to drink and do drugs. And I went to bed, and next morning I woke up and my prayer was answered. And that was 17 years ago.
I'm getting really emotional for you, but for me, because we have very parallel, similar stories. And I usually don't get.
She usually doesn't get this way.
Choked up. And my kids think I have a dark heart island because I don't cry a lot. But
I get choked up about hockey though, so it's okay.
But I guess my pain in my past, which I've overcome and moved on, and exactly like you said, if that walk through that and use it now to help people. It's just hearing it from you. I feel and hurt for you, even though you've come along and changed your life and are helping others. And so that's where that comes from. But not to get in all my whole thing, but I was abused by a teacher at school. It was, um, gosh, I'm trying to think. It started when I was in 4th grade, and it went on
Mhm.
for 3 years until, a circle of girls confronted. It's small town, so we confronted a friend whose dad was the superintendent, and I kind of broke the story by sharing because she was my best friend that lived across the street. And anyway, that abuse um, led me into a eating disorder of anorexia and bulimia that lasted more than 10 years, depression, suicidal thoughts, a little
Mhm.
what I call a semi-suicide attempt, and a very terrible life in my university years of looking for love in all the wrong places. And
Yep.
and then when I became a Christian through a group of friends in medical school and just seeking out because I was done with God too. And I had my dark spot, at the throne in the toilet, vomiting and abusing my body and doing various drugs and things too. It was um be, not quite instant like yours, but that moment of when I reached out and asked for I can't do this and asked for forgiveness of the abuser, but also
Mhm.
of what I had done. And that was the moment where I knew that I was going to be healed. It was just the only way. And then Tim and I at the same time met, and it kind of gets intertwined about how we got engaged and started dating. And the first couple of years, even when we were doing residency and we're together in Edmonton, I struggled a little bit. But then the moment I was healed and released, like I knew it. And so
But what was that? What was the
that
thing?
was the forgiving my abuser for me. Yeah.
Yeah, to me it was just total and utter surrender,
Yeah.
right? You know, I always find that God eventually will bring you to your knees at some point in your life, right? And for me, that was it,
Yeah.
Um, and you know, people often bring up, what you said earlier about, how are you able to function? Well, I read a book by a guy named Malcolm Gladwell called The Outliers.
Mhm.
And there's a chapter in the book where he explains if we want to be the elite of the elite of the elite in whatever field we choose, we got to put in 10,000 hours of practice. So I read that, closed the book, and reflected on my childhood. And I'm going, well, I put in 10,000 hours of practice. So when I stepped on the ice, no matter what kind of shape I was in, I'd put in 10,000 hours of practice, which meant I never had to think when I was on the ice because I trained myself to react. In those 10,000 hours, I trained myself to react to every situation that I would ever come across in a game. That's why hockey was easy for me, is because I put in the time, right? I put in the practice, I put in the work, which allowed me to be elite. So it didn't matter. When I stepped on the ice, my body and my unconscious memory knew exactly what to do.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating, but a really good point because a lot of people would think, well, how on earth do you function, whether you're still inebriated or hungover? How do you even
Yeah.
exactly function at that elite level?
Well,
And it's
and
it's it's basically not the word muscle memory. I don't like that, but it's like automatic. Your
yeah.
brain, your
Mhm.
neurons, everything knows what to do and can.
Yeah, it was like my
Yeah.
my brain chemistry was absolutely perfect when I was on the ice. The right amount of dopamine, serotonin,
uh,
all that, everything just came together from a neuroscience perspective. And, you know, the game was easy, right? It
Mhm.
really was, you know. But
Fascinating.
when you add the intangibles of, I was a highly competitive guy. I hated to lose. I loved playing against the best players because then I could put myself up against those people, So, all of that, combined, created this Theo Fleury guy who, wasn't supposed to play one game in the National Hockey League because from a pure physics perspective, I'm not supposed to have success, right? Because I was 6 inches shorter and 50 pounds lighter than everybody I was playing against. But what made me great was how I competed, how hard I worked, all of these things just came into this package, right?
So is that what got you selected when you were 15 by this coach? I mean, were you already at the sort of
I
peak,
was
basically playing in Russell?
Yeah.
And then, so did you go into Winnipeg onto the farm team there, or was this just a special something separate from like a junior?
No, I was drafted by the Winnipeg Warriors
Uh-huh.
when I was 14. And then I went to Winnipeg and I played tier 2 junior with the St. James Canadians.
Oh yeah.
And then every day after school, I would practice with the Winnipeg Warriors.
Yep.
And the year I was in Winnipeg, the team got sold to Moose Jaw. So the following year, I moved to Moose Jaw, and the guy that was abusing me got the head coaching job in Moose Jaw.
So he followed.
Yeah.
It all followed you there.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then after my first year in Moose Jaw, this guy got fired, and I never had to deal with him ever again.
Wow. And how many other guys were there with you that were in Winnipeg? And does anyone else go to Moose Jaw? Was it just you?
Well, what we know about pedophilia is by the time a pedophile gets caught, on average, he has 150 victims by the time he's caught.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's like a DUI. Like they say you have to drive drunk like 200 times or whatever. Yeah. I don't know the number.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah.
Wow.
So there was 6 of us that came forward and pressed charges. So that means there's 144 guys still out there who, are probably dealing with this, right?
And so when did that happen as far as the charges? Was that while you were in Moose Jaw? Or was it much later?
No. 2009, I went to the police in Winnipeg and filed my complaint.
So I thought, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought there was like a statute.
Not on abuse.
No?
No.
Interesting.
No.
There's no, what's the phrase?
Statute of limitations.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. In Canada, there is. In the US, there is.
Right.
So, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
I'm confusing with American law.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's, because it's the child abuse part, like, and kids, bury this.
Right.
Yeah. So in 2009, I wrote Playing with Fire,
mm-hmm.
Where I told the whole entire story, right? Because for 27 years, I carried a secret around. And, in society, there was absolutely no place for this story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I wrote the book. And I remember 4 days before I was going to Toronto to launch this book, and I was like shitting my pants.
I bet.
I was so scared, and I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And I also knew that I was going to go do a whole bunch of media, and I knew that the only thing that the media would be interested in would be to re-victimize me at every opportunity, right? So I spent 4 days on my computer researching every single thing I could find on the subject of sexual abuse, because I saw this as a massive opportunity to unveil the prevalence of pedophilia on the planet, right? And so I knew I had to be strong. I knew I needed to have as much information as possible. And sure enough, I go to Toronto. I do 300 interviews in the first 4 days that I'm there. And, just like I predicted, the only thing they were interested in was the gory details of my sexual abuse. But because I'd been in the media for 25 years, I knew that I didn't have to answer their questions directly, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I made sure that I had my own agenda. And so I was able to get this amazing story of hope and healing and recovery and all this information. And, a lot of the times, the interviewer's jaw was on the floor because they had no idea how prevalent, this type of affliction, affects people, right?
Which is pathetic. I mean, you think by 2009, it would have been more. Maybe I'm thinking still in terms of male abuse. Maybe not. I don't know. I have to dial back the years and think about it for sure.
Well, there is no difference.
No, I was going to say, I think that's what you heard. Right.
Just as many girls as boys get abused.
But
Right.
what people don't understand, and again, it's common sense, is that, like, when you think of the human trafficking side of it, it only is a multi-billion-dollar industry because there is an insatiable demand for it. If there was no,
it's a $200 billion industry per year.
Right.
And,
so
and
what is that?
And one kid can generate between $100,000 and $200,000 a year for a trafficker.
Damn.
Yeah.
So what is that? I mean, that's the thing. I remember hearing, I don't know, I was on like Nancy Grace or something. I was riding my motorcycle back from Sturgis, and I was just listening to talk radio, and they had this guy that is like this infiltrator, and he knows the dark web and the codes on Facebook and all that. And it was right before the Pacquiao fight with, what's his name, the MMA guy there.
Colin McGregor. Yeah.
Yeah. And he said, you have to understand, when that fight goes down, there'll be all these rich people come in. There'll be no parking for their private planes, and they will literally import hundreds of underage trafficked kids because the demand will be so staggeringly high. And I almost rode off the road, and you're like, no, these are like captains of industry. These are like people that you would look up to, very successful people that have an insatiable demand for sex with children. It makes you throw up in your mouth.
Yep. Well, it's in the underbelly of all of this insanity that's been going on for 3 years, So
let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how one day the lockdowns come, and all of a sudden you go into this sort of regressive period where you're like, I feel like I'm back where I was abused, and
I didn't know what it was. I just fell into this ugly depression, and I'm like, what the hell is this? I've spent $1 million on therapy. I've done 10,000 hours of therapy. I've done every kind of therapy known to mankind. And here I am. Stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped showering. At the beginning of COVID, I'm like, what the hell's going on? So I book an appointment with my therapist, and we start talking about, what's happening. And she says, in the middle of the conversation, she says, stop. And she says, well, let's compare the two things. She goes, what did your abuser use to get you to do what he wanted to do? I said, well, manipulation, coercion, lying, stealing, cheating. She goes, what's the government doing? Manipulating, coercion, lying, stealing, cheating. I'm like, holy shit. So my pedophile abuser used these tactics, and the government is using the exact same tactics to get us all to fall in line, and all this stuff. And I was just like blown away. And then, because I wasn't doing anything, obviously I got invited to do a lot of different people's podcasts. So I started to explain this. And you know what happened? My phone blew up. And I was getting messages from people all over the world saying, thank you. Thank you for explaining what I'm going through, because I couldn't figure it out either. Right? So the same tactics that a pedophile abuser is the same tactics that the government's using on us right now.
And you know what? I love how people reached out to you because we were on the front lines working in an urgent care, got defaulted as the COVID clinic because no one else wanted to see anybody, and everybody was afraid that these patients would kill them. So the clinic that we worked at, the urgent care, became the COVID clinic, and we did telehealth visits. We saw people in person, and the fear and the depression and all these things you're explaining, that was the first thing we noticed like right away. Even though as docs were like, well, you don't know how bad this is. Is it going to be like the 1918 flu pandemic? I mean, this could be scary. It could wipe out a lot of people. But what was so sad and apparent was just, and as time went on and months and even years, the fear instilled in people. And I just saw this trauma, and then as you know, as time went on, we were seeing kids take their lives. They were cut off from their social support, not just kids, adults. I mean, it was insane. And the damage that's being done to people through this lockdown and the mental health crisis is more devastating than the COVID.
Yeah.
Infection.
The real pandemic is mental illness. It's not COVID.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. And it's super interesting because the ultimate manipulator is fear.
Yeah.
And, I don't know who I told, we do a bunch of these shows, and it's just like, I never lost 1 second of sleep, like not 1 second of sleep about COVID. It never scared me. It didn't scare me for me. It didn't scare me for my kids. It didn't scare me for my 91-year-old mother. It never scared me because I started reading right off the bat. And I was like, well, it's a coronavirus. It's clearly not as contagious as, it's the original SARS or MERS, or not as lethal. It was less contagious.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, more contagious than SARS and MERS,
right.
but way less lethal, because that's how viruses work. Viruses that are super lethal aren't that contagious. So I'm sitting there with this baseline information going, it can only be so dangerous because if it's this contagious, it's not going to kill very many people because that's how viruses work. Virus is going to virus.
But that is
right. So I knew that, but like literally I'm doing telehealth with people that are coughing 2 weeks after they got COVID, and they're weeping because they're scared shitless that they're going to kill their entire family. And I'm like, where did that narrative come from? Well, you know exactly where it came from. It was the collusion of the government, of pharma, of the media. They were all the same hydra with different tentacles.
Mm-hmm. And, at the core of every single issue we have in society starts with trauma, unresolved trauma, right? And when you're traumatized, you can't critically think.
Right.
Because all you're doing is surviving.
Correct.
Right. So, what was really interesting to me is as soon as COVID hit, we saw a spike in mental illness. We saw a spike in opioid use. We saw a spike in suicidal ideation, and then ultimately people taking their own lives. And I'm going, this has nothing to do with coronavirus at all. It's all the propaganda and fear that they're putting on people. Right. And this is a psychological and spiritual war. And that's why we became so overwhelmed, is because we've never experienced the psychological and spiritual war in our life. Right. And what was interesting was somebody mentioned to me, why don't you try some 5D meditation? So I go on my phone, I go on YouTube, and I find 5D meditation. So I made a promise to myself, I'm going to do this for 2 weeks every night as I'm going to sleep. And as soon as I did that, oh my God, I raised my vibration, all the fear went away, and I started feeling great again.
What's 5D meditation?
It's it just raises your vibration. So
is it like a listening sort of
yeah,
app?
It's a guided meditation, right?
Okay, got it.
Where you're tapping into the source, like the real source, light and sound frequency and technology and all this cool stuff. And so I started raising my vibration, and I started feeling amazing. I started feeling great. And then I started talking about it and started suggesting it to people. And then people were coming back to me and saying, oh my God, thank you for suggesting this, because I feel great. Right? Because the people that are running the show, the Klaus Schwabs and the Joe Bidens and the Justin Trudeaus of the world, they live at a very low vibration. Right?
Very.
And so if we raise our vibration, then we won't get sucked in to this psychological and spiritual war that's happening, right? Which causes you to be more awake. And when you're more awake, you want to discern truth. You want to research. You want to know what is the truth. And, that's why I've taken such a firm stance. And I also know that I'm standing in my truth. Because for 27 years, I wasn't standing in my truth. And guess what happened? Almost killed me.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. So what are you doing now? I see that you have Canadians for Truth, Freedom and Justice behind you, which is just amazing. It makes me proud to be a Canadian, because there was a time there where I was so ashamed of ever saying where I was from.
Right.
I must be honest. And then the truckers came along, and I was like, oh my gosh, there is actual hope out there.
Yeah. Yeah. So Canadians for Truth, we're a media company that discerns the truth, because mainstream media in Canada they're all in on this, right? And all they do is lie and manipulate the truth 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So what we try to do is get great guests on, or do monologues about, what's really going on, right? And
I love it. It's the BS free Canadians show.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah.
Well, we're the patriots, right? We're the patriots of Canada. And I didn't really pay attention to politics at all. And 2015, I saw Trump come down the escalator. And I'm like, what the hell is this guy doing running?
Exactly what
right?
I was at the gym. I remember this. I know exactly where it was. I see him come down the escalator. I was at the gym with one of my best friends, and I went, the clown show has just started. That's literally what I said.
I said, I just need to pay more attention to what's going on. So, of course, I started watching CNN.
Sorry.
Yeah. And then I realized that, Fox was the alternative to CNN. So I started watching Fox, and I'm like, okay, this resonates with me a lot more than CNN, right? And then I went down the proverbial rabbit hole and got absolutely swallowed up by all of that. But it was a great exercise, because I realized that, the government hates us. They don't want us around anymore. They basically want us dead. I don't want to die, so I'm going to fight to the very end, tooth and nail, to get the truth out there. And that's what we've been doing at Canadians for Truth, is discerning truth, and, just trying to help as many people wake up as we possibly can.
I love it. It's so positive. My personal memories of Canadian media was like CBC, the national news. I always missed it when he moved down here, and we had a Canadian satellite dish for a while for all the good things like hockey and curling, because I'm the curling girl. But the news I liked, because they actually it wasn't all politics. Like in the US, pick your channel, you'll get your bias, and they don't talk about anything else going on in the world. And you would have what was his name?
Floyd
Robertson. I missed.
Oh, yes.
But at least you get stories about what was happening in North America and the world, and the positive stuff. I don't know if that's still happening.
It's actually Lloyd Robertson.
Lloyd, not Floyd.
Yeah.
Floyd.
I was thinking, Floyd.
No, that's from SCTV.
That's nice.
Earl Camembert and Floyd, something like that.
But you know what I mean? And then now
it's nothing but propaganda.
Yeah. Well, we talked to family, because all our family is still there, and friends. And what they see, of course, it's still a feed from the US mostly. So you pick your bias based on if you're watching CNN or Fox.
Yeah.
As far as what you hear about what's going on in the US as well.
Yeah, but in Canada now, I mean, it's the CBC, like, there's CTV, but it's CBC, which is owned by the Canadian government. Yeah. I mean, it's freaking Pravda. It's like you're back in the Soviet Union. There's no difference.
It's like we all have a radio in our house, just like they did in Nazi Germany in the 40s. It's pretty much the same.
I know. And so we talk to family, like my dad's up there again, and my sister doesn't watch much of the news, but your family, and they'll say things, and I'm like, where are you getting your news from? Because it's so narrow of focus. Like hear this, but that's not really what's happening. I mean, pick your story, COVID, even medical things in general. So is this a competitor to CBC, CTV channel
Yeah,
that you have going?
we're an independent media
Oh,
company.
wow. I love it. I
Have
love
you?
it.
What kind of
We have 4 shows a week
Uh-huh.
that come out. We also do Jamie Soleil. Do you know Jamie Soleil?
Oh,
Oh,
yes.
yes.
Yes, of
Yes.
course. Yeah.
So
Yes.
Jamie Soleil and I did a reality TV show in 2010 called Battle of the Blades, where
Oh,
they
yeah.
took
I
where
do
they
remember
took
that. Mhm.
where they took a former professional hockey player and turned him into a pairs figure skater.
How well
And
did
so
that go?
Jamie and I developed a pretty cool friendship. And then she called me out of the blue a couple of years ago and said, "Hey, Theo, are you awake?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm awake." She goes, "Well, I just woke up and I don't have any support or anything." And so, we started, we regenerated our friendship. And then I got involved with Canadians for Truth. And then I called her and said, "Would you like to be a part of what we're doing?" She said, "Yes." So the two of us also do live studio audience shows as well, a couple times a month, where we bring in a really cool guest. And yeah, we have a live audience and we have lots of fun. And there's a bunch of patriots in the room. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
That is awesome. Have you got pushback or censorship or any of this kind of stuff? That's
Not yet.
happened?
Not yet. No, but we get pummeled on social media every single day. So
Yeah, well, welcome
But-
to the club.
Yeah, but that might help.
I mean,
No, but honestly, that might
exactly.
like when you see that these people are, I mean, you just look at so the Cochrane Review, which is essentially the king of kings of medical review, came out a couple 2 or 3 weeks ago and
yeah,
basically said there's no evidence the masks do anything, right?
Yeah.
Well, these guys are still trying to spin it of, well, yeah, because the studies weren't good enough to show that. Well, okay, that may be true. But common sense will tell you if you can take our son did this. He took a vape pen, took a big hit off the vape pen, put a mask on, and it just comes blasting through there. And a coronavirus is like, one of the smallest viruses in the world. It's just few thousand base pairs. It's like it's like building the Hoover Dam out of a chain link fence.
Yeah.
I mean, common sense will tell you.
He's like, if my vape's blowing.
Well, they according to what I know, is they haven't even isolated the coronavirus. Like they haven't seen it, and so basically they rebranded the flu, and used gain of function research to create a bioweapon, which is the jab, and here we are, so there's a depopulation agenda set by the World Health Organization, United Nations, the World Economic Forum, and all of these politicians who are implementing or trying to implement this are all owned by those 3-letter organizations. It's not hard to figure out.
They're definitely all connected for sure.
Right. And at times I'm kind of like, if it's a bioweapon, if the jab's a bioweapon, at least so far.
Pfizer, the Project Veritas got that guy to say, basically, we use gain of function to create a bioweapon. That's what he said.
Well,
that's what he said.
Absolutely the truth.
So,
whether they were using it to use globally or whether, that's the thing that's up for debate, whether it was for military use.
Well, yes, according to Sasha Latipova, though, who we have interviewed before, who is spectacularly awesome.
Yes.
She got into the Pfizer documents and started doing the research, very similar to Naomi Wolf, where Naomi Wolf went through and basically collated all of this, 70 or 90,000 pages or whatever they've so far released. And Sasha backtracks it all to the DOD, that it was all military. Yeah. Like it was all, and it made sense, and it actually makes sense. And you don't have to go like completely tinfoil hat to understand this, because after 2001, then there was the anthrax scare. And so what ended up happening after that is there was a tremendous amount of Department of Defense money funneled into bioweapons research and vaccine research. And actually, Fauci in 2002 said this, that we have to have a drug for a bug within like a week or 24 hours or whatever it was. So they were researching this and frothing themselves all up that there was going to be a pandemic someday. There was going to be some big thing, and we had to be able to mitigate it right away, whether or not it was, intentionally released, whether or not it was natural. And this was all Department of Defense stuff. And Paul Alexander, who we've also interviewed, he comes through the Department of Defense. He was hired from McMaster through the DOD in 2000 or 2001. Malone, he'll tell you the same thing. Yep. Department of Defense, virtually every company that he worked with was DOD. DOD got into the bioweapons business bigly, to quote Trump.
Yeah.
And then the train left the tracks, just like in East Palestine.
Yeah.
And it's again, like this isn't wormhole stuff. This isn't that's essentially known. Like Sasha took the actual documents and just started looking at them and saw who was paying for what lines of research, and it all goes back to the Defense Department.
Yep. Yeah, it's complete insanity, right? And I lived in insanity the majority of my life. So, pattern recognition is one of the gifts that I got from my abuse as a child and as a kid, is I'm able to recognize danger very, very quickly. And, that's what's brought me here today. And that's why, we're doing this is the conspiracy theorists are pattern recognizing people who sit very high on the IQ scale.
That's right. That's, I remember hearing a lot about with COVID happening, and then all these things happening in the news, not just COVID, but the news, where all of a sudden they would ignore a story like the Hunter Biden laptop thing, and they're talking about some other thing to get your brain distracted, and then something else. And I remember hearing how they know to use that art of distraction, but also to put out all these other little things in order to sort of manipulate your fear, but also have you ignore the real thing going on in the world.
Last 3 years, the government has come out and admitted that UFOs might actually be real things, and admitted that the CIA was actually working with Lee Harvey Oswald. They actually came out and admitted that. And I call that the David Copperfield effect.
Yeah, exactly.
When you go to a David Copperfield show and the smoking hot blonde walks out into the front of the stage, you better be looking behind her, because that's where they're moving the music.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's
So do you run into any, I'm just curious, thinking how, you've got this awesome media outlet, any concerns now you're wanting to share the truth, have people come on there about getting shut down because of, in Canada, freedom of speech is not quite the same thing. Hate speech laws are out there. That would make me a little nervous. I mean, what are you not worried about that at all? No.
Well, where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
Right.
All of it.
So, we just have to continue to speak the truth, right?
Right.
And that's the thing, once you're awake, you can't unsee it anymore, right? You can't unsee it.
Exactly.
Right. And, it is a bit of a curse to be awake, it truly is.
Right.
Because they're getting more and more and more ridiculous. Like the story's getting more and more and more ridiculous as we go along. And that's the hard part, right? Is seeing how ridiculous they are, and still seeing, 80% of the population who are still completely asleep.
Well, I know it boggles my mind too, because it's how far, or I guess how cloudy your lenses can be. We were talking with a friend too about the art of distraction and kids, and now even people our age, everything's fast. Like something happens, and
Yeah, the
A
news
sto- a s-
cycles. The
a
news
s-
cycles are only an hour.
right. A story breaks, and then as soon as the next thing comes out, you totally forget about the fact that
Yeah.
Well,
X, Y, and
just
Z
go,
happened
but
yesterday.
yeah, but
It's
just
like
go
you're on to
back,
the next thing.
go back to 2010. Just think of something or some place or a vacation you're on in 2010, and tell people that there was gonna be a virus that was, materialized however it materialized, and the average age of death would be 80 years old, and for most people it was a medium
bad
to
flu.
bad flu. For a lot of people, it was a cold, but it would
Yep.
be dangerous, and there would be an uptick in deaths for sure.
Yeah.
But we would shut down the entire freaking world for that, not just like Italy, like the whole world would shut down for that. We'd release a vaccine with more side effects than any vaccine, within all vaccines before it combined in totality. And we saw that with our own eyes, seeing patients, vaccinated. They'd come in, arms red for 6 months. They've got POTS syndrome, like you name it. Okay. And then,
events.
oh, by the way, we're going to add into the fact that girls can have penises. And someone would tell you, no, you are an insane psychopath.
Yeah.
That was 13 years ago.
Mhm.
And you fast forward, and I remember guys like Glenn Beck saying this: buckle up, kids. In 10 years, you're not going to recognize the country. You're not going to recognize the country. You're not going to recognize the country. And I'm like, yep, I guess he was right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's well, I can't believe that we're grooming kids in school with drag shows, with all this stuff. And what we're doing is we're getting them prepared to have sex with adults. We're making it comfortable for them to see it, right? And grooming in Canada is against the law, right? So in Calgary right now, we have a mayor who was installed by the World Economic Forum, right? She's a crazy liberal, and she is having people arrested who are protesting at these drag shows.
Wow.
And grooming's against the law. So I'm like, where are Child and Family Services?
Right.
Why aren't they at these things? Because it's grooming, right? I've been groomed. I know what it looks like. I know what it smells like. I know what it tastes like. It's grooming. You're grooming kids.
Oh, I know.
Right.
I've gotten to discussions with, of course, strangers on Facebook, which is a stupid thing to do. But talking about these locally here with these drag shows with kids in it, and I say, how is this helpful? Like, you don't need to expose a kid to this. And of course, it's the stupidest arguments. Like, oh, they need to know what's out in the world when they're young, so it's acceptable.
Yeah, when they're 5.
Yeah. Anyway,
when they're 5, they need somebody twerking with
their brains
No.
aren't fully developed, so they don't even have a clue what's going on.
Right. And then I think, well, I'm just reduced to a 5-year-old trying to have an argument with some of these people. Then I have to pull the plug and stop because it's just silly. But it's ridiculous what's going on.
Yeah. And these, so I work in the prison system in Canada. Okay. And I work with inmates, helping them deal with their own traumatic childhood. Right. And all they are is just a bunch of little hurt boys. That's all they are. The guys that are in prison are a bunch of little hurt boys. But I also work with pedophiles in prison. And you know what they tell me? They say, don't let me out of here. And I go, why is that? They go, well, because even though I know that I'm doing something wrong, the urge is greater than my own common sense. So even though I know that I'm doing the wrong thing, I can't stop myself. So the only place I feel safe is in this 4x6 cell because it can't hurt anybody.
That's wow. Very, insightful, but also very sad.
That's
spiritual.
Well, it's satanic.
Yeah.
That's what that is.
Right.
Yes.
That's why it's sad.
So what are these drag shows? They are now the gathering place for pedophiles.
And that's what I was thinking of too. What's sick is when you look at what's happening with the trans thing going on, and some of the shows you've watched, the next thing is acceptance of this pedophilia type behavior. Even it's like, well, if you happen to like someone who's young, it's just your preference. And I'm thinking, what?
No, it's
You're making it
it's
acceptable,
against the law to have sex with kids.
right?
Period. That's
Yes.
it. Period.
Yes. But they're
And
trying to eke it into society. You know what I mean? It's
course
just that
they are.
little slippery, little
course.
bit by bit. You just make
Mhm.
this
Well-
acceptable, then this becomes. Then where do you draw the line? Well, there's no
It
line.
used to be against the law in Canada to kill patients as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So have you covered that at all? I'm thinking with what happened with COVID, the medical assistants in dying, the
We've
maid.
covered it all.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. This organization was originally created because they were lying about therapeutics and they were lying about mask wearing.
Mhm.
Right.
And they still
So
are.
if we would have gave everybody ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, we would have significantly decreased the amount of death that happened, right? But here's the thing about communism, and this is what they're trying to do. Is they're trying to bring a communist one world government into power, right? Well, this has been tried 24 times on the history of our planet. You know what? The only thing that comes out of communism? Mass death.
Mass.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's it. And what are we seeing?
You're right.
Exactly that.
Right. Which is the I guess the thing that's still the most staggering to me, because I remember, oh man, it must have been about a year and a half, maybe almost 2 years ago. I was like, okay, what's going to break the vaccine narrative is they're going to kill a cheerleader at a major university, and then there'll be one lawsuit, kind of like the Jerry Sandusky thing, and then once the Brinks truck drives up to one university, then there'll be many lawsuits and the whole narrative will come unwound. Well, so we watched Damar Hamlin collapse in front of 10 million people. Now, I'm not saying it's the vaccine because I don't know.
Right.
But it seems a little suspect when all these soccer players in Europe, and we have like a 100-time increase. I can't remember the exact number
Peter McCullough said.
of people just collapsing. Okay.
Yeah.
So it seems just a little coincidental, and people are still, and I mean, they damn near hadn't finished the chest compressions on that poor kid, and stuff's popping up on social media that it's not the vaccine. And I'm like, well, as soon as you say it's not the vaccine, it's the only thing people are going to think it is.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah, it's
I have
it's a really sad place that we're living in right now. There's not a lot of people selling hope. There's not a lot of people, that realize what the hell's going on the planet, and these people are sick. They should not be none of these people should be in positions of leadership. They should all be in rubber rooms because they're insane. They are completely 100% insane.
I agree with you. My thing is, so people in government are elected usually, of course, and we can get it, I guess, go down that whole bunny trail of it's all corrupt how they get in, because if we, the people, elect them into power and give them all this power, then how do we change that? I mean, obviously we have to elect different people. We have to get involved and get in there to make change. But
even the elections aren't fair anymore.
No, I know, exactly.
Or have they ever been?
Right.
Have they ever been?
Exactly.
Right?
That's,
you know what I mean? So,
No.
We need a whole new system. I believe that we don't need federal governments and we don't need provincial governments anymore. We need municipal governments, and that's it. Because, as a citizen of Canada, I have 3 responsibilities: pay my taxes, vote, and stay out of jail. And other than that, I do not need the government involved in my life whatsoever.
Well, absolutely. And that's, it brings the point where, back to that, sort of prima facie dictum of politics, which is all politics is local. So the hope is, if you get pissed off and you want to do something, don't run for Congress, run for school board, run
Yep.
for
Mhm.
you know, to
Yep.
be an alderman in your town. Like
Yep.
that's where you really can affect some major change, and that grassroots level growth politically actually changes things the further up the stream you go.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's the hope.
That's where you cut the roots of corruption is locally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's where you have to start, because
Yeah.
basically your little community where you're at.
Right,
What?
but it's interesting because part of the destruction with, you know, the explosion of the trans stuff, with all of this, is to destroy families. And when you
Yeah.
destroy families, you destroy
Well, and
community.
get rid of the masculine male.
Yeah.
Right?
No, that's
Yeah.
Exactly.
They want to get rid of me. Right?
yes.
But good luck with that.
but
Exactly.
hello to the masculine female. I mean, it's just all chat.
Well, no, but when you look at it, I love what Naomi Wolf says. She said there's clearly an agenda to get rid of women. I
Yeah.
mean, like, what?
Well, they think that the world is overpopulated. Right? That's their whole, you know, marketing thing, is they want people to believe that the world is overpopulated. Well, I live in Canada.
Yeah, you're not contributing to the cause.
You know,
Yeah,
and
exactly. That's
you know,
funny.
there's people in Canada who live in the most extreme conditions on the planet. Anybody who lives north of Edmonton, you know, it's extreme, right?
Right.
Extremely cold, you know, all these things. So, you know,
You guys
Those are the
could use
toughest
some more
people.
global warming,
I
actually.
know.
yes, that would be nice. That
Right.
would be
'Cause
nice. Yeah,
that's
we could grow food longer.
Imagine
Right?
Yes.
that.
Yeah,
That's the next tentacle of the Hydra to come out. That'll be the next big thing, is, you know, you know, this
and here's one thing I'll say, is that God doesn't create viruses that kill people. People create viruses that kill people. It's that
Wow.
simple. It's that
But-
simple.
But it was interesting because it was one of the most common sense things that never really came out, which was, you know, Bill Gates is spouting there's going to be a pandemic, it could kill a gazillion people, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But you look at it and you go, if there was a pandemic that was going to kill all of humans, we'd already be dead,
Yeah.
because we've had more than enough
yes.
time, with terrible sanitation, with terrible waterworks, with drinking out of streams, et cetera, to wipe out the earth.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah.
it doesn't happen, because virus is virus. Yes, there's pandemics. Yes, there's, 1918 was really the worst ever,
Yeah.
but it gets better. It goes
Yeah.
away. And
Yeah, because God built the immune system.
yes,
What's that?
It's
not even
probably
allowed to
it's
talk
it's
about that.
probably his greatest invention, right?
Oh, it's crazy. I mean,
And why do you think these evil bastards are going after people's immune systems?
No, and we have so many shows, and we get every show circles back and gets somehow into that, how things manipulate the immune system. We've covered from
Yeah.
immunizations to this COVID, everything that's affecting people's immune systems in the last 30 years, and how that there's the uptick in all these autoimmune illnesses, kids' behavioral issues, etc. So I think there's a human hand in all of this for sure. How can there not be?
Yeah.
I want to kind of jump in and say, because I'm excited for for Canadians that haven't, maybe they do know all about your show and where to find it. But what are some of the favorite topics quickly that you guys have, other than COVID,
We've covered pretty much.
or that would that say, if you were to pick like 3 or 4 of the really fun interviews and things that you've done in the last little bit?
Well, I interviewed Tucker Carlson.
Uh-huh.
which
No,
was
that's
awesome. And I asked him a question. I said, if you were to give Canadians one piece of advice, what would that be? And without hesitation, he goes, don't let them take your guns.
I think,
yes.
yeah. I was going to say, I think they've already done that.
I was like, yes. Yeah.
Well, right. I mean, no Second Amendment, no First. That's kind of how it works.
Yeah.
Where's your studio? So did he come up there? Or did you have to go down to him?
No, we just did it remotely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
awesome.
But
And
what's
so-
kind of been cool is, we've developed this kind of weird friendship now,
Mhm.
and I've been on his show 3 times. He's been on my show now, but it's and you know what? I met him in person. He's exactly the same guy that you see on TV,
And it's
So
you can tell when people
Yeah.
are honest and real. You know that
Mhm.
they're going to be that way in real
Yeah.
life. At least
Yeah.
I can.
So to see it,
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
a good guy. He's a
That's
good guy.
awesome.
yeah, no, and well, man, last night when he released the J6 videos and
Awesome.
that was just
Yeah.
wow. And more's coming soon. So
Yeah. I saw Chuck Schumer's head explode on TV this morning. So
Ew.
yeah, it's like Scanners, that old horror movie. It's like yeah, it's just
Yeah.
it's crazy.
So where do people find Canadians for Truth? Do you just
yeah,
type it
just go to
into
CanadiansForTruth.ca.
and then you're there. I love
Yep,
it.
we're there. We have all of our shows there. We have our mission statement. Everything's on the website. You can follow me on social media at Theo Fleury 14
Mhm.
on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all those great platforms. Jamie's on there as well. Yeah,
Awesome.
we're discerning truth and just trying to wake people up.
I love it.
Outstanding. Well, thank you so much for the time. This has just been awesome. I know we have a lot of Canadian listeners, and I'm going to be getting a ton of feedback on this one.
Yeah.
So, yes, maybe in our travels, we're apparently moving into a motorhome here in the next 6 months. Maybe we'll
Cool.
roll through Calgary and give you a high five.
Yeah, that'd be great. Or if Rachel Notley gets in, I'm moving to Florida the next day. So
Okay. Well, we could be neighbors.
yeah, exactly.
All right.
It's no secret that medicine is a bit uptight. That's why Tim and I created BS Free MD to mix things up a little and have fun in the process. Besides, we are having these exact same discussions all the time, so we thought we might as well invite everyone to the party. If you really like us, you can get plenty more and maybe see one of Tim's cool tattoos on our Instagram or Facebook pages at BS Free MD. See you next time.
While we try to keep BS Free MD as raw and real as possible, we can't be held responsible for any medical decisions or discussions had as a result of what you've heard on the show. We know, bummer. But the truth is, we really do care about your questions. So feel free to reach out to us by email at doc@bsfreemd.com.